Imagine the deafening roar of four Wright Cyclone engines as a B-17 Flying Fortress climbs through the thin sub-zero air of 1944. Inside the unpressurized cockpit, the temperature has plummeted to 50 degrees below zero, a cold so biting it can freeze human skin to metal in seconds. The pilot, his hands heavy in electrically heated gloves that barely work, reaches behind his seat to a specialized metal rack. Bolted there is a rugged, hammer-tone green cylinder, a piece of survival gear as vital as his parachute. For over a century, this was the natural habitat of the Stanley thermos, the calloused hands of the men who built the Hoover Dam, the steel-eyed engineers of the American Railroad, and the elite crews of the Army Air Corps. It was a silent witness to the industrial might of the 20th century, a functional relic that promised to keep coffee hot and the American spirit alive. But today, if you walk into a Target or a Starbucks in suburban America, you won't see a B-17 pilot. Instead, you'll see a line of frantic shoppers camping out overnight, occasionally erupting into actual riots over a pastel pink cup. In a twist that no business school could have predicted, this grandpa brand was hijacked by a digital wave of suburban mothers and teenage girls, transforming a $35 utility item into a $750 million global status symbol. In just 4 years, Stanley went from a sleepy $70 million company nearing the discontinuation of its now iconic cup to a cultural behemoth that dominates every corner of the internet. Today, we go beyond the viral TikToks to uncover the secret history of an American legend, from the high-voltage laboratory of a forgotten genius to the boardroom of a marketing visionary who realized that in the 21st century, you don't sell a bottle, you sell an identity. The DNA of this phenomenon begins not with a social media algorithm, but with a literal spark of genius in the late 19th century. William Stanley Jr. was a self-taught electrical engineer whose name belongs in the same breath as Edison, Westinghouse, and Tesla, yet he remains a footnote in history. Long before he ever thought about drinkware, Stanley perfected the first electrical transformer and established the alternating current system that allowed electricity to travel safely over long distances. He was a man of high-voltage precision, earning over 100 patents in his lifetime. In 1913, fueled by a simple, personal desire to keep his coffee piping hot throughout his long, isolated hours in the lab, Stanley applied his knowledge of thermal conductivity to solve a critical flaw in the vacuum bottles of the era. At the time, thermoses were delicate instruments. They relied on fragile glass interiors that would shatter at the slightest bump on a job site. For a blue-collar worker in 1913, breaking a thermos was a financial catastrophe. The cost of replacing a shattered glass bottle could equal $200 in today's money. Stanley's revolutionary insight was to fuse the vacuum seal with the strength of steel, effectively creating an unbreakable double-walled fortress for liquids. He was so confident in this marriage of electrical welding and thermal insulation that he launched his bottles with a simple, bold slogan: "It will not break." To achieve this near indestructibility, Stanley introduced a technical innovation known as char-vac. This process involved packing charcoal dust between the two stainless steel walls while the vacuum insulation was being created. The charcoal wasn't just an insulator, it provided unprecedented structural reinforcement, ensuring that even if the bottle took a direct hit from a heavy tool or a fall from a height, the vacuum seal would remain intact. This technology was so effective that it became the industry standard for nearly a century, utilized until 2009. These early Ferrostat and SuperVac models were heavy, bulky, and practically eternal. The engineering was so robust that the U.S. Army reportedly conducted tests by dropping the bottles out of airplanes and running them over with tanks, finding that while the bodies might be dented and the paint scratched, the Stanley spirit remained unbroken. This reputation for extreme durability wasn't just a marketing claim, it was verified by the strange and heroic jobs the Stanley bottle began to perform. Beyond the construction site, Stanley bottles were used by deep-sea explorers, in the cattle industry for transporting bull semen across vast distances, and even by medical couriers to deliver human organs to transplant centers. It was a brand for the extreme, for the tough, and for the essential. Nowhere was this toughness more vital in the strategic bombardment missions of World War II. Airmen flying in Boeing B-17s and B-24s faced 10-hour missions in conditions that were punishing for the human body. Because the planes were unheated and unpressurized, the crews relied on specialized gear to maintain their alertness and combat the lethal lethargy of the cold. The Stanley SuperVac became a standard part of the Flying Fortress interior, mounted in inverted racks behind the co-pilot. These weren't standard consumer models. They were modified with specific release valves so that freezing, exhausted crews could dispense hot coffee into paper cups without struggling with a screw cap in the middle of a dogfight. There are legendary accounts of these bottles surviving mortar blasts that incinerated the rest of a soldier's gear, and of pilots who clung to their Stanleys as their only source of warmth after bailing out into the English Channel. When the war ended, these men brought their Stanleys home. The brand became a rite of passage, a family institution passed from fathers to sons in construction, mining, and railroad trades. There are documented stories of a Stanley bottle falling 1,600 feet down an underground mine shaft in 1978, only to be found floating in the sump hours later, banged up but completely solid. Another account tells of a plumber whose hotel was leveled by a freak gas explosion in 1979. After the rubble was cleared, the only thing left standing, untouched amid the ashes, was his Stanley thermos. However, by the dawn of the 21st century, this very reputation for being rugged and unbreakable had become a golden cage. By 2012, Stanley's own marketing still boasted that its products resonated with 30-year veteran policemen and retired Army soldiers. The brand was trapped in the camping aisle, invisible to anyone under the age of 60. While younger, more agile competitors like Yeti and Hydro Flask were beginning to dominate the lifestyle and wellness markets, Stanley's annual revenues had stagnated at around $70 million. The company was essentially a sleepy little brand, known only for hammer-tone green cylinders that smelled like their grandfather's garage. In 2016, in a desperate attempt to modernize, Stanley released the Adventure Quencher, a massive 40-ounce tumbler with a handle and a straw designed to fit into a car cup holder. But the launch was a complete disaster. The company continued to market it as a rugged piece of adventure gear to men who didn't want a cup with a straw. By 2019, sales were so lackluster that the Quencher was not even being prioritized for production. Stanley leadership was ready to let it die, unaware that the savior of their 100-year-old empire was about to come from a source they had never once considered. The turning point didn't occur in a high-rise office in Seattle, but on a blog in Utah called The Buy Guide, run by 3 women, Linda Hutchinson, Ashley LeSueur, and Taylor Cannon. Ashley had discovered the Quencher at a Bed Bath & Beyond in 2017 and realized immediately that Stanley had completely misread the room. This wasn't a piece of camping gear, it was the ultimate solution for busy, on-the-go mothers who needed all-day hydration while juggling kids, groceries, and long commutes. For a nursing mother or a teacher, the quencher's ability to keep ice cold for 12 hours and fit into a minivan's cup holder was revolutionary. When the Buy Guide women learned that Stanley was planning to discontinue the cup in 2019, they didn't just write a blog post, they took a massive financial risk. They convinced a skeptical sales manager named Lauren Solomon to let them purchase 5,000 units at wholesale with their own personal savings to sell directly to their audience. The result was a shock to the system. The entire inventory vanished in 5 days. When they repeated the experiment, another 5,000 cups were gone in just 1 hour. These women had proven that the future of this century-old brand lay in the hands of women who viewed their water bottles as emotional support accessories. This proof of concept paved the way for the 2020 hiring of Terence Reilly as president. Terence was a marketing wizard who had previously performed a miraculous 180 on the Crocs brand, taking it from a fashion punchline to a global staple. He brought with him a playbook of sneakerhead marketing, the idea that you don't just stock a product, you release drops. He shifted the brand's entire aesthetic, trading military greens for a rainbow of pastels and treating each new color release like a limited edition fashion event. He institutionalized a culture of servant leadership, personally calling employees during Friday flybys to ask how the brand was treating them. Under his watch, the Stanley Quencher became synonymous with the clean girl aesthetic and the water talk movement. But the most defining moment of his tenure occurred in November 2023, when a TikTok user named Danielle shared a video of the charred, melted remains of her car after a devastating fire. In the center console sat her Stanley Quencher, covered in ash but perfectly intact. When she shook it, the sound of ice still clinking inside echoed across the internet. In a masterclass of corporate empathy, Reilly responded within 24 hours via a TikTok duet, offering to replace not just her bottle, but her entire vehicle. That single moment of brand heroism garnered over 92 million views and drove Stanley's revenue to an astounding $750 million by the end of the year. Today, the Stanley phenomenon is a study of both the power of community and the fragility of viral success. The brand has moved from the toolbox to the handbag, with the New York Times referring to its cult-like following as the sisterhood of the Stanley tumbler. However, as we enter 2025 and 2026, the brand is facing the inevitable laws of market gravity. Sales growth in the premium hydration category has slowed from 38% to just 14%, and Stanley's once unrivaled lead in the Amazon charts is beginning to slip as agile disruptors like Owala gain momentum. Furthermore, the brand has faced its first modern investigative crisis, viral reports of lead pellets used to seal the vacuum insulation at the base of the cups. While Stanley clarified that this is an industry standard and that the lead is encapsulated under a permanent layer of stainless steel, a claim supported by federal judges who dismissed class action lawsuits in 2026, the controversy revealed the vulnerability of a brand built on internet hype. The story of Stanley is a reminder that while engineering can sustain a company for a century, it is the ability to listen, pivot, and connect with the zeitgeist that turns a tool into a legend. Whether the Stanley Quencher remains a permanent fixture on American countertops or becomes the beanie baby of the 2020s is a question only time and the next viral trend can answer. For now, the name Stanley stands as a $600 billion ghost of the past, reborn as a colorful icon of the present, proving that even the oldest giants can learn to dance if they just listen to the right music.